The first months of a romantic relationship, especially when you've been alone a long time or you fear that you'll never really be loved, those first months can feel like everything. It's powerful, right? Like there's a sweetness at last that moves through everything in your life, like you're seen as good and beautiful and worthy. And it can feel like all your problems have been solved. But then, with time, the problems appear. And this is normal, that time reveals how human people in relationships are. We're flawed. And everything depends on being able to see and weigh those flaws. Are they quirks or are they life-ruining disasters hanging by a thread, about to capsize everything good in your life? This is when you need to know the signs of whether someone is truly a good match and if both of you are ready for actual love. My letter today is from a woman I'll call Meg, and she writes, "Dear crappy childhood fairy, I'm struggling with several issues in my relationship and I feel overwhelmed about how to proceed." All right, I've got my fairy pencil. I'm going to go through and circle things I want to come back to on a second reading, but let's see what's going on in Meg's relationship. She says, "My boyfriend James and I have been together for 6 months. I'm 37 and he's 44. He's a recovered alcoholic, sober 9 years. He killed the person in the car who was with him in a drunk driving accident, and he went to jail for it and is now religious and 9 years sober. I have a history of neglect and sexual abuse that I worry may be clouding my judgment." She says, "We've had some incredible moments together and I love him deeply. We're also navigating some complex dynamics that leave me feeling uncertain about our future. James recently asked me to make my Instagram private and give up my creator account because he has, quote, security concerns, and he doesn't want his ex, M, to see our potential engagement. M has been a recurring issue. She's reached out to me with accusations about James, for example, claiming he never blocked her when he said he did, and warning me about his alleged behavior. James says he texted her at 1 a.m. to get closure and then blocked her, but M insists he didn't block her. He also hasn't made any public posts about me on his social media and seems resistant to the idea of making our relationship more visible. I've made significant sacrifices for James, like adjusting my lifestyle and decisions to accommodate his requests, but I often feel like he prioritizes his own needs and comfort over mine. For example, he can be critical about my habits, like using too many paper towels, and often seems dismissive when I express concerns about how I'm feeling. He has a pattern of making decisions that feel more about avoiding conflict with others, like M, than focusing on what's best for our relationship. James was in a 7-year relationship with his ex before we started dating, and he was still disentangling from that when we got together. They slept together the night after our first time, sadly. We were not official, but it still hurt to hear from her. He also begged me to live with him, but changed his mind last minute when the priest told him it wasn't a good idea before marriage. During this time, he was texting and calling M. He called her 2 weeks ago to talk to her about her depression, she says. M continues to reach out to me, sharing details that sometimes align with my own concerns about James's honesty. Recently, she sent a message warning me that James lies and suggesting I ask him to make our relationship more public. I've been converting to Catholicism to align with James's desire to get married in the church, which has been a big emotional and spiritual commitment for me. Despite this, there's no engagement yet, and I sometimes feel like his timeline for marriage is vague and unmotivated. I've set a drop-dead date for clarity about our future for a few months from now, but I feel unsure if waiting that long is the right choice. How do I address the Instagram situation without feeling like I'm losing my autonomy or hiding our relationship? He made me give up my creator account and make my account private. How do I navigate my growing concerns about James prioritizing himself over us as a couple? Should I be worried about his late-night text to M and her claims that he never blocked her? How do I verify the truth? Is it a red flag that James avoids making our relationship public and hasn't included me in his social media? Am I overreacting by feeling resentful about all the sacrifices I've made? Or are these feelings valid? I should act on them. How can I better evaluate whether this relationship is truly healthy and worth continuing long term? I'm feeling torn between my love for James and the mounting frustrations in our relationship. I want to approach this thoughtfully and make decisions that are best for my future, but I feel stuck. I would deeply appreciate your perspective on how to navigate. All right, Meg, you got it. It's tough love fairy time. This is a mess. And your questions are all like, how do I know if it's really like that great? And you just listed for me like 30 reasons that it's like really, really messed up right now. So I don't doubt that you love the guy, and it does seem he's interested in you. But let's go through the letter and I'll tell you what you told me. All right, you've only been together 6 months. I'm just going to say, hands down, nobody should consider engagement 12 months. I'd say 12 to 18 months is the window that is like possible to even consider getting engaged with somebody. It is way too early to consider that. The reason people date and the reason they don't live together while dating is so that they can get information about the other person to see if they meet their standards for what would be a good and healthy relationship. Now, what I'm getting is maybe because you grew up with a lot of trauma, you don't have standards. You're basically fitting your life to a lot of like terrible behavior from him and big, big red flags. Now, this thing where he killed somebody in a car in a drunk driving accident and went to jail, I understand it was a long time ago, 9-10 years ago, and he served his time, and now he's sober and he's religious. But I'll tell you what, he's not emotionally sober. This is really messy. The main fact about him is that he's completely entangled with his ex. She's barely even an ex. And you're so worried about blocking, but you're the one talking to her all the time and allowing her to gossip and trash talk him to you, which I'm just going to call you out on, Meg. That's not appropriate behavior for somebody who intends to marry a man. You don't do that. So let this be dating time where you collect information, but please don't live with him. It's really common that people just start sleeping together really quickly. And so you slept with a guy who was still very much entangled with his ex. And now you've been together 6 months and he's still entangled. He's still trying to, I think he's trying to keep the door open, frankly. And even if he doesn't think that's possible. And this M person, she's definitely trying to keep the door open. She's in there. She's like the main factor of your relationship right now. It's not just James, it's both of you. You need to develop emotional strength and clarity and moral strength about what really constitutes a dating relationship and allow the decision about getting married to go well into the future. You are not there right now. Anybody who's still entangled with their ex, I wouldn't date them. I just wouldn't date them. And so maybe you're already attached to him because you got into the relationship under false pretenses that it was over and then you found out and you couldn't leave. But this is how heartaches develop. If it were me, Meg, I would definitely get some distance here. Maybe keep the door open to, since you love him, since you feel like there's potential there, keep the door open to letting information come to you, but making no effort at all to try to get him to behave for you. Trying to get him to behave for you is basically showing him a map of how to manipulate you into thinking that you should stay. And something tells me he is really trying to get his old relationship back, and you're there as a placeholder in case he can't. Now, part of this thing where he doesn't want to make you public as his girlfriend, and really, you guys are dating, you're dating. It would be normal in some relationships not to make it public on social. It would be normal in other relationships to make it very public. But if he doesn't want to, and his answers about why make you feel terrible, there's your answer, Meg. It's like something is wrong there. Something is wrong. She reaches out with accusations. Now, this whole thing about whether he blocked her or not, I want to tell you something about blocking. I know that younger people, and you're younger than me, younger people treat blocking like this automatic thing you do. But really, blocking is most appropriate when somebody won't leave you alone, right? And apparently she won't. But blocking is an emotional act, really. It's an emotional act where you're no longer having contact with an ex. Now, if he's with you and it's causing huge problems in your relationship, his contact with her would rightfully need to end. And he's not willing to do that, Meg. That's not what's going on. And perhaps he says he would. Any guy who's texting an ex to get closure at 1 a.m., that's not closure. That's trying to reopen something. That's emotional dysregulation. It's the opposite of emotional sobriety. You don't want to marry a person who can't control their communications in the middle of the night with an ex. And another thing you'll learn from me, I have a lot of videos about this. A lot of times what people call closure is the opposite. It's trying to reopen. You can use a conversation of like, this is it. I think we should never talk again. You can use that to emotionally manipulate somebody, to put their cards on the table and see if there's a chance with them. And if it's happening at 1 a.m, well, okay, that's just what I think, okay? You get to judge, but you feel bad enough about this that you're writing to me, and you wondered what you could do. And this is a good thing to do, is to put it up here, and I think you'll see in the comments, you can get a feel for what everybody else thinks about this. He's made no public posts. He doesn't want to hurt her. And you've made significant sacrifices. Okay, I'm calling you on it, Meg. Why are you sacrificing for somebody you're merely dating? You don't need to make sacrifices. You've been dating a guy for 6 months. Sacrifices are for somebody you're already married to, you've made a lifetime commitment to, something has changed, and now you have to sacrifice. And you don't have to sacrifice to date people. Nothing serious. So adjusting your lifestyle decisions to accommodate his requests. So I don't know what you're talking about. If they're his requests and you're accommodating and they're not things that you want, it doesn't sound like alignment. What I'm hearing is that you really want this to turn into marriage, and you're willing to put up with a lot of terrible behavior for it to just be a marriage. But a marriage, even if you can get the Catholic Church itself to make it happen for you, it's not a marriage. And the Catholic Church is pretty good at detecting this, by the way. It's not a marriage if both people are not emotionally mature and in a place where they can commit themselves fully to the other person. All right? I'm not hearing that. So he's critical about your habits. Okay. Dismissive when you express concerns about how you're feeling. That's not a great characteristic. I don't get a sense of the weight of those problems, how critical he is, how dismissive he is. But critical and dismissive, those are kind of, for a lot of people, those would be deal breakers. But paper towel arguments are bound to come up between couples. So I don't know. I don't know how heavy that is. And then he has a pattern of making decisions that feel more about avoiding conflict with others, like his ex, than focusing on what's best for our relationship. Yes, you have demonstrated that pattern, and that's what I think is not suitable for commitment right now. Dating, perhaps, but not commitment. And then, yeah, they were 7 years together, and then he slept with you, then slept with her, so he had this very messy transition. And during this time, he was texting and calling her, and he called her 2 weeks ago to talk about her depression. Okay, sometimes exes have that type of friendship, and our culture sort of says you're supposed to, but the depth of his relationship and the secrecy and the weird dynamics and her intrusion on you to try to tell you he's a bad guy, all of this is just hands down, it's totally inappropriate. This is not healthy. So she continues to reach out to you, sharing details. I don't know, she's trying to drive you away or get validation for her resentment at him. Neither of you should be having contact with her like this. And then she warned you, and you've been converting to Catholicism to align with his desire to get married in the church. All right, you can become a Catholic if you want, but that really needs to be something that you want. And I know that sometimes when people really, really love somebody, they're willing to change and, join a very serious religion with a whole bunch of structure to it. I hope you are doing this very conscientiously and knowingly. It's not right to convert just to get the marriage permission in the church and just because he wants it. There's a lot of stuff that he's doing that's not consistent with Catholic teaching, either. This sounds like just a lot of, what we call in 12-step world, self-will. He's got this vision of what he wants in the future. He's not really including you in his life. It can't be public, but you have to convert. Nothing feels right here. Should I be worried about his late night text to her? Yes. Claims he never blocked her. Blocking or not, you guys are way in contact with her. Is it a red flag that he avoids making relationship public? Yes. And hasn't included me. Am I overreacting by feeling resentful about all the sacrifices I've made, or are these valid feelings I should act on? What I question is why you're resentful at him that you're making sacrifices. This is a matter to take up with yourself. Why am I making sacrifices for this guy? He's not really treating me very well. So I suspect that this love you have for him has a lot to do with a strong attachment, and that maybe you've been hurt in your attachment zone before. And so the attachment is like a cart getting ahead of the horse here. The attachment is there without actually the experience of knowing him. So can I suggest that you don't even think of making thoughts about marriage for, in this case, at least a year? And, date him if you like. But I think the red flags are quite a lot. You said you had put this deadline on the relationship for a few months from now. So a deadline is not a bad thing, but you don't tell the other person what it is. You don't put them under that kind of pressure. That's manipulation. What you really want when you're dating a person is you want information to come to you, not with them being, having a sword hanging over their head that they have to behave a certain way or they're going to lose you. Like, that's manipulation. So you just say, I just want to see if it turns into that by this date. And then for my own sake, I'm going to move on. So I think that's the right way to have an ultimatum, is quite quietly. For that. That's my opinion, and that's what I did in my relationship. We were slow to get engaged, and it was about 3 years, and I didn't tell him, but it would have been about a month after he did actually ask me to marry him. So I never had to tell him that that's what was going on, and I was under a lot of stress, but because we had been dating 3 years, I was pretty worried that it wasn't going there, and that he wasn't going to be able to get off the pot, you know what I mean? But he was, and perhaps I would have been flexible about that time if something had shifted. I wasn't trying to punish him. It was starting to really preoccupy me that I wanted to get married, and it had been 3 years and it hadn't gone there. That was just my honest feeling. But the way that I avoided manipulating him with that is by not talking about it. This deadline you have is 9 months after you begun to date in a very rocky, tumultuous, messy relationship. I just think that's you putting self-will, putting a very, intense pressure of what you want out of this that's not actually happening in this, that would only bring you unhappiness. Maybe this one needs a lot of time to unfold. Maybe some things are going to happen in the next 3 to 6 months that are going to make it a lot clearer whether this relationship has potential or not. I would bet if you were to give it 6 more months, you'd have more information. But here's the thing about relationships that are emotionally draining and, mentally fogging and, where you're always getting gaslit about, I did block her, I didn't block her, and you're getting called by the ex. It starts to grind you down and you start to have very poor perception. So 6 months from now, if this sort of shenanigans continues, it's very likely you're not going to have the mental strength to make a decision about this being good or not for you, that you're going to be too ground down. You're just going to be dragged along with whatever happens. So if you were asking me what to do, I would say this is a no. This one's a no. I do think that whole thing that he's an alcoholic, but he's lying. He's entangled with an ex. He's sober, but he's not. And he's religious, but he's not. If he's really serious about the Catholic Church, why is he having premarital sex with 2 different women? I'm just saying, right? So there's a lack of integrity around what he's doing that is certainly not worth you changing your life around to try to conform. There's nothing for you to conform with. He has a dream of getting married in the church, which is a lovely dream, and maybe he can rise to that. Maybe you will together, but I would let this take time. Take marriage off the table. Don't live with him. That's my 2 cents, Meg. Okay, well, with that, I'm going to leave you with something. I have a list of red flags to look for, and you can keep this with you. If you're watching this video and you're dating somebody and, or just kind of out there meeting people at parties, keep this in your bag or your back pocket so you can keep checking with yourself and get real. One of the red flags is that they're still entangled with an ex. I think that might be the #1 red flag. So I'll put that in there, but there's lots of them to keep your eye on. You can download that for free right here, and I will see you very soon.